The subject assigned today is the Constitution of Pakistan, Islamic or Colonial. Now, before we address this particular subject and topic from the perspective of the Constitution, let me declare that this is a suggestive talk coming from the taxpayer's perspective. There are the four institutions of the government: the judiciary, the civil bureaucracy, the army, and the parliaments. And therefore, the entire talk is suggestive, and from the perspective of the Constitution, it is neither treasonous, seditious, or in any way in defiance of the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. On the contrary, it is to initiate a debate for better legislation and for the purposes of getting the Constitution and the statutes that are in place and that keep evolving, keep getting legislated, to remain within the consonance and the spirit of the Constitution as it does exist. Now, the first thing which would be important to understand is the need and the efficacy of a constitution. A constitution for any political territory or for any society is a requirement with two primary purposes in view. Number one is the management of society, on which the Constitution has been, or for them has been, invoked. And the other is to support legislation within a framework which is based on ideology and a philosophical plane that supports it. Of course, the faculties of sociology, the faculties of history, the faculty of managemental sciences all kick in when such a document and under it the statutes are being addressed, viewed, and brought about. The purpose of this talk this evening was essentially to point out at a dichotomy that does exist. We have a constitution for a nation state called the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, presumed to have been created on the basis of the Islamic ideology, and also based on a two-nation theory which, in its larger understanding, clearly takes the Muslim societies on the one hand and all others as a different civilization altogether. Then, in this particular constitution, we have, right in the preamble, and I will read this for the benefit of my listeners, that whereas sovereignty over the entire universe belongs to Almighty Allah alone, and the authority to be exercised by the people of Pakistan within the limits prescribed by Him, i.e. Allah, is a sacred trust. And whereas it is the will of the people of Pakistan to establish an order, wherein the state shall exercise its powers and authority through the chosen representatives of the people, wherein the principles of democracy, freedom, equality, tolerance, and social justice, as enunciated by Islam, shall be fully observed, wherein the Muslims shall be enabled to order their lives and the individual and collective affairs in accordance with the teachings and requirements of Islam as set out in the Holy Quran and Sunnah, wherein adequate provisions shall be made for the minorities freely to profess and practice their religions and develop their cultures, wherein the territories now included in or in accession with Pakistan and such other territories as may hereafter be included in or accede to Pakistan shall form a federation wherein the units will be autonomous, with such boundaries and limitations on their powers and authority as may be prescribed, wherein shall be guaranteed fundamental rights including equality of status, of opportunity and before law, social, economic and political justice and freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship and association, subject to law and public morality, wherein adequate provision shall be made to safeguard the legitimate interest of minorities and backward and depressed classes, wherein the independence of the judiciary shall be fully secured, wherein the integrity of the territories of the Federation, its independence and all its rights, including its sovereign rights on land, sea and air, shall be safeguarded, so that the people of Pakistan may prosper and attain their rightful and honored place amongst the nations of the world and make their full contribution towards international peace and progress and happiness of humanity. Now, this is the preamble, and we are now going to move from what the preamble of the Constitution, together with the objectives resolution, therein that everything within the country, social, material, judicial, and from the perspective of welfare and security will be in consonance with Islam. So we have two approaches to this when we examine what is in letter and what is in reality. In the last 7+ decades. What have we achieved? Where have we gone wrong? And what are we upholding by way of a status quo? Is it the rigors of everyday life without planning? Or are we like a herd of sheep that are being heard on an agenda which is neither in consonance with the Constitution or in the following of the laws that have been and they remain in place. The Constitution basically, therefore, is an umbrella providing you a basis of philosophy and ideology under which statutes in the country have to be structured and legislated and invoked. The dichotomy here today is that while the Constitution is Islamic, the statutes under it have been inherited from the colonists and we uphold them. The majority of the statutes are not in consonance with Islam. They do not represent the spirit or the letter or the philosophy or the ideology of Islam, and therefore have become representative of a factor of oppression on the people of Pakistan. Therefore, essentially, the responsibility heavily lies on the legislative assemblies that have existed in the past 7 decades and do so right now, for having upheld the status quo, for having to uphold the status quo, for a colonial model for governance, which is oppressive. And that is why this subject is so important, so pertinent, and warrants not only cognizance, but warrants clear debate, thought for a change as soon as possible. From the preamble just read out, there are a few things which are fundamental, and at the top of my list would be the independence of the judiciary. To dispense the dispensation of justice, a judiciary has to be absolutely independent in an Islamic environment. And the flaw right now that we see is that while the Constitution is Islamic and the statutes are non-Islamic, so the dispensation of justice has become politicized. And this has brought about a great amount of turmoil in all segments of the society, where harmonious living and existence has become near impossible. While the preamble also supports the establishment of social justice, it is very silent on material justice. And this absence is crucial in this day and age. When you address governance for any social environment, it is the resources that enable governance for the purposes of security, for the purposes of welfare, for the purposes of education, for the purposes of existence of a population that is being governed. To give you an example, let's take clause 25A of the Constitution, where children have to be educated free in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. We have not been able to achieve this. And I take this as an example for you to understand that this was not possible, and this is still not possible, because the resources required to achieve this particular objective were never available. They are not available, they have not been available for only one reason: that the people in the driving seat of the government are either ignorant of the status of the wealth of this nation, or they are misappropriating it. The second most pertinent point in this observation and assertion is that they are leaning on an alien economic order for everything they need to do with borrowed money. This borrowed money has dumped this nation state as not only a client state, but in a state of slavery. So your respect within the community of nations stands far-fetched and a dream. The reason why the alien agendas have been upheld is because a handful of people that have usurped governance in denial of the Constitution have towed the line of donors who have had a simple agenda for over 300 years plus of colonizing global territories and robbing them of their labor and natural resources. So, when we address the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, we have to essentially revert to our ideology. So what does our ideology have to say about this? Does it say that we have to follow an alien agenda of pirates who want to commit to ransacking our natural resources, keeping our people hungry, taking away our labor for pittance? Or does our ideology say that we have to build our dream world based on our own labor and our own natural resources given to us by the Creator Himself? This is a very, very basic and fundamental issue because it challenges the constitutional reach and dimension of fiscal autarky, of our ideology, of our material, for the establishment of material justice and social justice within our territory, our political territory. Then, because of this factor of borrowing, we have had to lean extensively on a taxation structure that does not only allow the marauders to rob us of our natural resources and our labor, but also penalize us with interest for the amounts they give us. So it's a case of case of double jeopardy here. And this is being upheld. All this excuse that our survival without the assistance from donors is impossible is, to use a donor's term, called hogwash. By assessment, which is already reported, published by foreign and local statistics, our asset base really places us in the ranks of one of the richest regions in the region, in one of the richest nation states in the region. The effects of borrowing have affected the establishment of social justice, the establishment of material justice, the establishment and provision of welfare and adequate security for the nation state. And all this is in place for two reasons: that the demands of the Constitution of Pakistan on the rulers is being ignored. The demand of the Constitution on our leaning on our own ideology and the philosophy that supports it, the history that supports it, is being ignored. So what we have in the larger context are a set of international pirates who appointed a small set of their representatives within the nation state to uphold their piracy. And for all political rhetoric, which we have heard over the last 7 decades and we hear every day today, is absolutely meaningless. Because in tangible terms, it does not benefit us, the people, whose taxes support those alienated leaders that are upholding the status quo. And mind you, they are not only among the politicians. They are among all 4 segments that constitute the government, be it the judiciary, be it the army, be it the civil bureaucracy, be it the people sitting in the parliaments. Therefore, towards the invoking of the Constitution of Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, we need solutions on the way forward. They have to be definitive, they have to be intelligently structured, they have to be purposefully invoked, and this is something which the people of this country need to understand and move towards. In the first step, all such statutes that are under the umbrella of the Constitution, that have been inherited from the colonists, have to be done away with. All such foreign protocols, agreements that challenge our ideology have to be forsaken. And all the institutions of the state that have been mandated should do their particular job on the basis of the merit the job warrants. And this is a demand by every citizen of this country that contributes for the existence of the government. In the final analysis, what has to be understood for countering a rudimentary debate that we have been hearing, an alibi, an argument that we have been hearing from the ruling elite, is a question of the cost of governance. To them, the cost of the governance is reflected in our budgets, where about 2.6 million people use up 82% of our budget, and 221 million people are left with crumbs representing 18%. From our perspective, the cost of government is the cost of education, the cost of nourishing food, the cost of shelter, the cost of dole for the old, cost of dole for the unemployed, and the cost of defending the ideological plane or the demands of the Constitution of Pakistan by an effective military force. This cost has to come from liberties, again, which are provided within the ambit of our ideological basis. While the Constitution has a lot to say about it, we need to see it implemented in letter and spirit. The progress, the cost for running the government can only come from liberties that support the freedom of enterprise, the freedom of movement, the freedom of compulsive education and its need, the provision of managing a population in its best form of health and care, which will automatically produce and does provide an output that can support the cost of governance as it stands today 35 times over. It is common knowledge for all, whether it is spoken of or it is not, that one small little segment of society has used force to retain the status quo, implementing the agenda of the colonists, and this guarantees the infringement of our Constitution and the decimation of the nation state as it does exist today. In concluding this particular talk, I implore, submit, and invite the people in office, the ruling elite, to expand their vision and see the consequences from the perspective of our historical background, our present pathetic situation on all counts, and opt for the following of the Constitution, both in letter and spirit. Thank you.